The reveals for Set 5 of Divines have been going over the weeks, and I haven't really done much discussion about them since Liel Odium. So I thought in this video I would sit down and talk about all of the reveals basically up until the Levidress Empireo reveal as well. And overall, I think this set is interesting in that a lot of the cards feel like they're decent, they're fine, but it doesn't feel like that much of a banger like end of season set, like for example set 13 was. Like, we're getting these big boss units and we're getting some support for other decks, but overall just feels like there's something missing that would make this set really go crazy in terms of hype. So let's talk about it and take a look at the cards and what I mean. So picking up from the Liel stuff, we have a lot of generic things in this set that are shared across the nation. So we've got like these commons that get extra power and shield when your opponent has a G-zone, and there's a lot of stuff that cares about your opponent having a G-zone. It's like, yeah, not really much to talk about with these. It's like, if the only thing that's made me think is, oh, are they gonna print more G units? And lo and behold, that's what they did. And then there's a bunch of support for like the quick starter decks, where it's like they have like back row grade 1 interceptors that like all of them got, which is like, it's just kind of boring. Like, I don't know, I really don't like this kind of like common card design. I think the first interesting thing we had was there was the Keter Liel support that I think we haven't had revealed until, or I didn't talk about in the video. And it feels kind of strange. Like, the triple rare is like a top 5 to call one for CB1, and then it's also like when your unit is bound, he gets 5k and you may soul charge, which like soul is appreciated. Liel does run out of soul, but it's basically a replacement for the generic in a sense, and it doesn't feel like it really patches up any of the issues that Liel had in the first place. Like, the double rare is also kind of like when your Liel Vanguard displays Energy Blast 3, bind this to draw 1. It's also just like, I guess it's cool, it sets itself up. Like, they are support cards, they are good support cards in theory, I guess, but technically it's not really like the cards that Liel needed to become a better deck. So it feels like, I don't know, a little bit disappointing. That was already my first impression. There are a lot of random banger commons that I'll bring up though for older decks, especially the promo based ones. So for example, this Garlic is support for Claudine. So this one's like when it boosts a plant token for each of your tokens, it gets 5k. And then in the back row, when your plant token in this column stands, he also stands. So this is like huge for Claudine because this makes insanely high numbers. They remade the Eugene ride line. The ride line itself is a lot better, I would say, than before, but that's not exactly the highest bar to surpass. You know, the grade 2 is like when Road Over, Energy Blast 3, draw 2, put a card from hand to soul. It's like, that's a good skill, right? The grade 1's a searcher as well, but Eugene himself is treated as the original Eugene, and they did make him better, but again, the bottom line of making a better Eugene is very low. So they made it that he rests 2 rears and retires a column now. Fantastic. And now when he attacks, he CB1 Soul Boss 1 to call 2 cards basically to the same column, and then he himself gets 5k, and if your opponent's grade 3 or greater and they have 3 or more empty rearguard circles, then the called units get 5k extra. I feel like you could have just kept it to this 1 or 2. Like, it could have been like, if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, or if they have 3 or more empty rearguard circles, then they get plus 5k. Like, that way even going first would be good. Whereas now it's like other decks are putting on way more firepower. Why are they nerfing Eugene in already bad deck, right? It doesn't really make sense to me. Impaldi also got like a triple rare that doesn't feel like it does much for the deck. It's a Energy Blast 3 if you have an engage to look at top 5 and call a card that is different named from this unit that is same or lower grade than your Vanguard to rear. And if you have 5 or more gauge when this boost, you Soul Boss 1 to give him 5k, which is like, okay, sweet, awesome. You have another way to call things out, another way to deck thin, and you didn't have any energy users in the deck before, so that's, you got one, fantastic. But the plus 5k needing 5 gauge means it's not going to really fire until like maybe turn 3 or like most cases turn 4, I guess. I was really hoping the deck would get another way to not energy charge, but to charge something into the gauge during your main phase outside of just Impaldio's own effect. But instead we just got another superior caller, which is like, you know, we need more good targets to call first and foremost, I think. There's been a couple interesting engines in the set too. So Stoichea got this interesting engine with this like dragon that like counts 1 to look for, I'm not sure what the trait translates as, but it's basically like this grade 2 bug looking cat and then this grade 1 flying raccoon. So basically it looks for them and calls up to 2 of them, and if you called 1 or less, you can make a plant token, which is like pretty strong honestly for CB1. And when this stands by an ability, you Soul Boss 1 to stand another rear guard in the same column as it that has that trait. So that's pretty strong, especially in anything that would restand your stuff. But I'm kind of thinking, what does restand stuff in Stoichea? It's like Zorga's divine skill, or I feel like what like Claudine, I think, has to stand tokens, doesn't say she, so I don't know. I don't really feel like this could be good in the future in like some random deck that stands things, but for the time being, I don't really see it as being too crazy. It's like the grade 2 is basically, it makes a token for free, and then the grade 1 lets you sack a token to get plus 10k. So it's a cool engine. It's pretty strong, honestly, but at the same time, you're also, you know, if you already have a good deck build of something, you're not going to take out important cards to play this either. Another kind of like disappointment for me was the Lascaria support. Like the triple rare is literally, they took the rare from DivineZ Set 1. Instead of top 5 search, now she finds top 7 and she gets plus 5k. So it's like, you basically upgraded an old card that was already fine, honestly. We didn't need a replacement for it, and you made it triple rare. Like, why is this a triple? It doesn't, you could have made a more interesting card to support Lascaria, but instead you did this. For Rotovisor, I guess I feel a bit better. I made a short, I guess, covering these cards, but the set order is a bit disappointing. It is a good effect, but it not being grade 1 is a bit annoying. Like, they're still very adamant about Rotovisor being a turn 4 deck. I don't know what dangers they felt in the playtesting team by testing this card as a grade 1, but you know, it is what it is, I guess. And then the grade 3 Lotovisor, I think, is the main feature that makes, you know, your Lotovisor's Vanguard skill CB1 instead of 2, and the fact that it restands all your arenas, so for your restood rearguard effects you can still use the arenas is pretty good, and also buffs your frontal rearguards by 10k. So this one grade 3 I think is like the backbone of the deck now, and I think it will be very good, but it's also like you got to make sure you hit that backbone in order to make this deck actually do something, which I think is going to be, you know, a bit of a difficult situation for a deck like this. There was a bit of hero support. I feel like the wing guy, the common, was like fine. He like basically, he skips the base effect by himself. So what I mean by that is that he rests the base to call himself out and get 5k, and he rests the base to guard with himself, so you don't have to discard anywhere, you just have to rest the base to get him out of there. And then there's the grade 3 double rare that, like, when scouted, would Energy Blast 3 to get himself back to hand and soul charge 1 if you want to, and otherwise like an 18k attacker or like a 10k shield, which is like, it's not really what heroes needed. Like, heroes rearguards are actually quite good. It's the Vanguard that sucks, and I feel like you could make a better DNOs at this point too. The generics for this set, they actually did bring back like united generics across all nations, but they're not very good, and they all have basically the same effect. So they're grade 1s. I'll bring up the Stoichea one as an example. That's saying as long as you don't have a G zone, you have these effects, right? If you have a G zone, these cards are vanillas. So in hand, you can discard this as long as you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard to choose 2 cards that were in your ride deck from your soul or drop and put them back to the ride deck. And then you look at top 7 for a grade 3 or greater with a different name from your Vanguard, reveal it, add it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. If you didn't reveal, you then have to get this card back from drop to hand. And then if you guard with this card, this is where each of them have a different condition. So like the Stoichea one says, if you have 4 more drop, then this gets plus 5k shield. And then this part is the same across all of them. If your opponent has a G zone, then you can bind a grade 3 from your soul or drop to get another 10k shield. So to me, these feel like just worse versions of the carbuncles from like not even Divine, from D set 12, I want to say. Like, it literally just feels like a downgraded version of those. Like, those have, especially the Dark States one, has way better effects, right? You're countercharging, you know, other ones are like 20k shields, no questions asked. Why are these like 10k shield if you fulfill a condition and 20k shield if your opponent's a G zone, but also you can't use these if you have a G zone? So like, who's gonna really use these? The only ones I can imagine is gonna be like these new decks that actually have a different grade 3 they want to ride, and like, I guess like would the dress up units even use them? I'd have to check the ruling again. I don't know, it just feels like the usage for these cards feels very limited. I don't know if it's like something like Tith Fault, where it was super underestimated at the beginning and then there were decks that could use it very easily and then it became good. Sure, like maybe will become a norm in the next season, where it's like we'll have Vanguards that need a different Vanguard to change into all the time, and that'll be like the next gimmick. So these, I could see them easily designing stuff to make these good, but on release, I think these will be cheap. I think on release, these will not really be like going for much, and I'm honestly like, I think it's fine. Then much like the Stoichea one, they made like these 3 sisters into cards as well for Lyrical. It's kind of similar as the Stoichea one. They all just kind of support each other and like search for each other, so I don't really want to like spend too much time going over it, but it's a pretty good engine. Dolls got a countercharger, which I think is relevant, but Direful Dolls aren't exactly like the best deck. They get some rogue tops here and there, but I feel like it always just is like kind of lying very low. But having a countercharge also binds your units to give you more defensive output, I think is always good. But I think until we get 30 minutes round time, it's going to be a little bit rough. Flagberg also got really good support. Got a grade 3 that when placed from hand soul charges 1 if you want to, and once per turn when your Vanguard has finished attacking, or sorry, when this finishes attacking the Vanguard, if it's the first or second battle of the turn, so wave 1 or 2 as the boomers would call it, and your Vanguard is still a standing Flagberg, you can CB1 or Energy Blast 3, that's the important part, to stand this and give it 10k for the turn. So that's really good, where you swing with this Energy Blast 3 and swing again with it for much bigger numbers, and the fact that it gets to plus 10k means it scales over defensives. And the fact that this can be both first or second attack means that this pairs really well with other like first or second attack wanting effects. I think this also means that you can basically have 2 of these out, attack with it for the first attack, restand it, and then attack with the other one for the second attack, restand it, then you can still do third and fourth attack with them and then do fifth attack with Flagberg. So this card is really, really good. That's a very strong support for Flagberg. Lee Sheffield got a really good grade 1 as well, in my opinion. That deck is honestly like definitely not to be underestimated. Lee Sheffield is super strong. So this one's like when called from anywhere, if you have a Lee Sheffield Vanguard, you can counterblast 1 and choose a grade 2 or lower normal unit that is from your soul that's different name from her and not a sentinel. Add it to your hand and you may soul charge 1. So you do need to achieve a soul requirement for the divine skill in this deck, so the soul charge can be important here and there, but after you do, you don't need that soul anymore. So her second skill says when she boosts, if you have Alicia Phil Vanguard, you soul blast 2 to get plus 10k, which is good. You don't have a use for that soul after you use divine skill, so might as well, right? I do think this is really good because it lets you get back the counter charger, and also just like a lot of the other good cards that go to soul, you know, thanks to Alicia Phil's effect. So you can reuse your strong cards all the time thanks to this one, and I do think that she's going to be very good. You can't get her back herself though, so you do have to be careful with your copies, but this does feel like a very automatic 4 in Alicia Phil to me. Elido Glamour, I don't know if people even remember that deck. It got really good support. It got a common that overshadows every single other common that's been shown so far. I've been skipping a lot of cards, obviously. I'm just talking about my highlights here. But basically it's an act that retires itself and it chooses 3 or more different set orders from your hand and puts them, lets you reveal them all. And then you can put all of the revealed set orders to your order zone, and if you did, draw 1. This just like breaks the game in a way that, you know, normally you're only allowed to set 1 order per turn. This just like poops them all out all at once, which is really strong because Elido Glamour restands itself and its board based on how many orders it can put back from the order zone. So this just turbos your game plan. Like this one card alone actually really makes a big difference. And the double rare too is like when it attacks, if your Vanguard is an Elido Glamour, if you have 3 or more different set orders, you can counterblast 1 and Energy Blast 3 to draw 1, and for that turn get 10k. And if you have 5 or more different ones, it gets a crit. This is not once per turn. So that means that when Elido Glamour attacks, you can restand this and you can use this effect again to basically draw a total of 2 cards, gain a total of 20k power, and gain a total of 2 crit, which is really, really good. I think them not putting once per turn in this card has really made people suddenly reassess Elido Glamour, which I think will be probably a pretty good like sleeper deck as well. And then my boy Elk Livra got support as well, which I'm very happy about. Some pretty interesting cards. We got a grade 2 that looks like a Duel Masters card, looks like Red Zone a little bit. That basically is a 15k shield and also like a good rearguard attacker as well. We have another grade 3 that this one I quite like too, is like when placed on rear, you can choose a card in your drop and put it to bot deck that isn't a trigger, and if you put a grade 3, you can almost want to draw a card. So it's basically like, you know, Secondo from Eva, except it costs a CB, but you have countercharge in this deck, so you don't really care. And then the overcharge ability is like after it attacks, if it was selected by a Cleaver this turn, you can put it to soul to choose you're gonna give it 5k. So you can give that to the restanding rear, for example, if you only have 1 of them out, and then that makes that also much stronger, which I think is honestly like pretty good. I could see myself playing a couple copies of this. And then the grade 2 triple rare basically is like an insta 4 of. She's when placed from hand, look at top 7 for a different named overcharge ability possessing card or the order that revives stuff and add it to your hand. And then if you did, you put a card from hand to soul or discard it. And that effect is also pretty good because you can discard something that you can then immediately revive with a grade 3 order if you found it. So I think just for that reason, this card is pretty free. Like putting something to soul means it can become a cost, and if you discard it, it can be something you revive. So overall, it's not really much of a downside. And then she's also like a 20k attacker if she's selected by your overcharge ability, which is pretty good. So the Algriva stuff I rate relatively highly. There's a little bit of like Biko Unica support. Basically, one of them lets you get stuff from drop to soul. So basically lets you put the triggers into soul and then get power. And then if you stand this by your Astroa's effect, if you have 4 more crits in bind zone, this also gets a crit, which I guess is pretty strong with like Biko Mass in particular, I think. So that way you have a bit more crit pressure, which I guess is pretty nice. And then they also got basically a searcher for Unica as well, which I guess is pretty interesting. My saying of pretty interesting usually means it's not really that great. We got jump scared with really good looking youth support in terms of art, at least. Specifically this grade 2 I think is a card that I can see being played, but does feel like she could have done a little bit more. She looks like she's straight out of like Granblue Fantasy or Fire Emblem to me. So she basically says if she was discarded from hand during your ride phase or main phase, if your Vanguard is a youth grade 2 or greater, you energy blast 3 to call her out. So that's nice. You can ditch her for ride cost for grade 2 basically, and then she will come out for 3 energy, which is very good. And when she is placed on rear basically, you can choose a revolve form in your drop or face up damage zone and put it into your soul. And then if you put it from damage zone, you have to put the top card of your deck into your damage. So this is really good because now you can pretty safely play one-ofs of the revolve forms and not feel like you're going to be in danger if you can't search them from the deck, which I think is definitely pretty good. So I think we can definitely like probably just cut down like all 3 of them to 1 each and then just play this. I wish she gained a bit of power. I feel like even 5k for like putting a revolve form would have been very nice, or like 5k when called would have been nice. So that part feels a little bit missing to me, but overall I mean, youth hasn't gotten support in so long. I feel like this is already something that you're pretty happy about. And now before we jump into Levidrus and like the last few reveals of this week, I do want to spend a tiny bit of time talking about the collab deck in this set, which is Love and Berry. I'm not going to spend too much time because I know the English side doesn't know when this comes out, so you probably don't even care, but it does look to be a very strong collab deck, specifically Love. So Berry, to explain very briefly, is like both of these decks, they work kind of like Mushi King, where they have a crest that searches your deck for the clothing items, which are basically orders that you put into the order zone, and then you get effects based on if you have them or not. So for example, this grade 3 Berry needs 3 specific items in there, and then depending on how many of the items you have in your order zone, she gets the effects. So for example, the grade 3 says when you have 1 or more of the items written on her in your order zone, she, at the end of the battle she attacked, counterlasts 1, chooses a different named berry from your soul, rides it as stand, and end of turn basically re-rides into this one. If you have 2 or more, she gets 5k during both players' turns. She's an MLB basically. And if you have 3 or more of her items, then at the start of your battle phase, she gives you the skill that all of your front units get plus 5k, even if you rewrite into a new Vanguard. And then like the grade 2 berries basically have similar effects, like gain power, gain shield, have like guard restricts, or gain power, you know, even more power and stuff like that. And she also has like a counter charger. They both actually have counter charging grade 1s. But so she's basically a restanding Vanguard in a sense, but the Love is the really good one, because Love is a grade 3 that if you have her 3 items, so if you have 1 or more of her items, she gets +1 drive, so she's permanently triple driving. If you have 2 of her items, she has permanent 18k power, so she's permanent MLB with triple drive. And if you have all 3 of her items, at the end of her battle, she counterlasts 1 and stands all front row rear guards. And if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, the stood cards get plus 10k. And she has a rear guard that basically allows you to on attack Soul Blast 1 retire something, that searches you stuff and gets power. And so basically being a 5 attack with buff with triple drive MLB is very good. So I think I do expect Love specifically to perform pretty well. Not so much Berry, I think, but just kind of watch this space. I think if you see Love and Berry in the WGP results, you can refer back to this video and you'll know what it does at a very brief and, you know, baseline level. But anyway, let's talk about the actual thumbnail of the video, which is Levidrus. So Levidrus got its new form, Levidrus Imperial, the Destined King, that has a continuous skill that means it's treated as the original Levidrus, but that means that if you ride the original Levidrus, you can still use the generic grade 1 cycler from this set to search for Empireo. And then for every copy of original Levidrus in your soul, so including himself, I guess, he gets plus 5k and also inherits the divine skill. So if you haven't used the divine skill yet of the original, like if you went first, for example, you can then use it. And then once per turn, you get to counterblast 1 or put a card from hand to soul to choose 2 of any player's circles and put Infinity Eyes markers on them. And if you put Levidrus as the cost for this, you know, card from hand, then you get put 3. So in that sense, you know, you sometimes might forego Persona Ride just to put a 3rd marker, and that does mean you might want to run more of the base Levidrus in that sense as well. And then the other effect is basically the same as the base Levidrus. So, you know, anything with a marker that attacks can get 10k or minus 10k, and if you gave something minus 10k, then you remove the marker from that and you draw a card. So the base leverage doesn't really change that much. I think the biggest difference I already talked about in a short already is that this can put the markers anywhere. So that means that you don't have to necessarily put the 3 markers on your side of the field. You can just put them on your opponent's side of the field and debuff them a lot more. And the fact that the Levidra's gains power himself is also very important too. Now, the support cards initially on first look to me seemed pretty mid, but one of the players I really admire and talk to a lot, Ryo-san, he tested them and said that they actually felt very good. So I'm looking forward to see what he has cooked up with them. So the grade 3 is a card that basically, if you have 3 markers on the field, Soul Blast 1 revives herself from drop if you don't have a copy of her on the field. And when she attacks, if you have a marker in the same column as her, she retires one of your other rear guards to get 10k, and then allows you at the end of the battle to retire herself to draw 1. Retiring one of your other rear guards is a little bit annoying, not gonna lie, in the current build of it. But I think if you build it with the new cards, it might not be as bad. So Ryo-san actually said you have a lot of spare CB in the deck now that you use, you know, the Levidra's doesn't cost CB to put down markers anymore. So that's where the new grade 3 comes in, where at the end of his battle, you either counterblast 1 or remove a marker. So you don't want to be doing that. You want to just be doing counterblast 1 to draw 1 and choose another rear guard and give it 5k for the turn. And the main target of that would be the new grade 1, which says, end of the battle that it boosted, you Soul Blast 1, move it to a back row rear guard circle that is empty. And then as long as the circle you moved it to has a marker on it, this will stand and gain 5k for the turn. So I guess like optimally you would swing with like, let's say the grade 3, right? And then CB1 to draw and power up the grade 1. Then you would swing with, I don't know, let's say the rear guard, and then she would retire a back row attacker, right? And then it would be boosted by that grade 1, and then the grade 1 would then, after that boost, would move to that back row attacker circle, and then you can still attack with your Vanguard. So like the attack pattern feels a bit awkward. I guess you could attack with Vanguard first and then do all of that after that too. It does feel like the back row attacker grade 3 is going to be very important, but I'm not sure how much the current back row attacking giving grade 1 is going to be played. But overall, I do see kind of like the vision where you like pass a lot of these extra 5k powers to that grade 1 and then move it around and make use of its power quite a lot. It does feel like a deck that's going to be a little bit complex to play, but it does feel like it's going to be pretty good just because of the fact that you can put 3 markers on from the very first time you go into Empideo. So that's Empideo. I think overall, the support seems promising, and I think people will definitely cook with it. So I'm very excited to see like the first WGP results. The first WGP results for this event, I don't know if we have one on the release weekend, but we do have Tokyo the week after that, and that's going to be a very big one. It's going to have, I think, at least 1,500 players, so it's going to be a very major tournament. And then in terms of the more recent reveals, I'll just go over the highlights. The Chris Rain double rare is insane. This card is really, really good. On place rear, Soul Blast 2 different named cards if you have a Chris Rain Vanguard to search your deck for a grade 1 that isn't a Sentinel, and if you don't have another rear guard with the same name as it, you call it out. Then give it 5k and shuffle your deck. And when she attacks, if your Vanguard is Chris Rain and your opponent's on grade 3 or greater, she gets 5k. So this means that you can like search out Yuika, you can search out like the grade 1 that restands your rears. This is such a good consistency boost for Chris Rain that it's actually pretty insane. So Chris Rain, I think, has been getting good support set after set, and I think honestly, it might be her time. This might be the season where we see Chris Rain actually perform really well. There was also a bunch of Alden support, but honestly, it was pretty disappointing. The grade 3 is pretty bad. The grade 1 is like retire, but it costs a CB, which like, I don't know, you use your CB not that aggressively in Alden, but still it's not exactly what I wanted. And then the grade 2 double rare is like the most disappointing thing for me. Like she is only when placed by your Alden Vanguard's ability, she is able to give another unit plus 5k for the turn. And if she was called in a circle that had something on it, she gives it 10k instead. Why is this not just when placed if you have an Alden unit? Like this can only be placed by your Alden Vanguard's ability. So that means your grade 2 ride line cannot call this for that effect either. And that's like, why? Like if Airmac can, which is a card from last year, why can't this? Airmac is a rare, a common, a rare, I think. This is a double rare. Like, I don't get it. Sure, she gets 5k shield if you have an Alden Vanguard, but like, that's not the point. So I don't know. I'm very disappointed in the Alden support. I feel like it could have been way better. What I'm not disappointed in though is the Flamgram support. So Flamgram got 2 really busted cards. The grade 1 says in drop, when your Flamgram unit card would retire from rear, you bind this card and return the retired card back to your hand. And by the way, all the Flamgram cards, all the rear guards are self-retire. So that means you're basically basically not losing out on those pieces. But then the Flamgram support guitar, Grenadine, is the one that's really good. She's a triple rare, and she says when she's placed from hand on rear, you count must 1, and look at the top cards of your deck equal to how many Flamgram units you have on board. Choose one from among them, add it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. So this is really good. This is like Eva's act skill with researches, but even more usable because it just relies on your number of rear guards. So even if you have just her in the Vanguard, you're still gonna be able to, you know, look at top 2, which is very good. And it lets you choose anything and not show it. So you can take PGs, you can take whatever you want that isn't just Flamgram units and add it to hand. So that's really, really good. But then she has an act skill that says if you have a Flamgram Vanguard, you Energy Blast 2 and retire this, which again has synergy with that grade 1 earlier. And it gives you, the player, the skill for that turn that all of your Flamgram units base power becomes 13k, including the grade 0 that the grade 3 form changes into. So this is really, really big. I think that skill plus the grade, like the grade 1 and like both skills of the grade 2 are really, really good. Expect Flamgram to get some tops. I think this is of like all the random decks so far, like especially compared to like Lascaria and Rotovisor, this deck is popping off. Or I guess Lascaria is not a fair comparison. It's like Rotovisor and Gryandra, I think, are the more better comparisons. And then finally, today's reveal, when I'm making this at least, was the prison support. So this is already like 30 minutes long, so I don't want to stretch it out for far longer. Rush to B, everyone's favorite CSGO player, is kind of skippable. He's just a fun little robot that lets you gain 15k shield if you put back one of your imprisoned cards to your opponent's hand, which is like, don't do that. But the grade 2 is very good in my opinion. Capture Cherino says when she attacks, if your Vanguard is a Seraph grade 3 or greater, Soul Blast 1, your opponent chooses a card from their drop and imprisons it, and she gets 5k. So that's already very good. Like, you know, doesn't have to target the field or anything. This doesn't care about ladder. Good way to set up the prison, especially on the grade 3 turns. But when she finishes attacking, she can retire herself to choose a card imprison your opponent's prison and bot deck it. And if you did, you draw 1. Now that is a good effect. I think that is really, really nice. Not only do you get to like make your opponent prison stuff, but then it's like you could also bot deck it. But for example, if they don't have anything in prison and they choose like their OT or something, and then that's your only choice to bot deck, then obviously you're going to choose to not retire her and do that effect. But then they also just put in bad cards into their prison, so I guess it's fine. They don't want to really call out the OT, I guess, unless they're playing like Zorga or something. So I think this is a cool addition into prison overall. All right, that's gonna do it. These were basically my discussion on the reveals. Last time I did this with Jason, we recorded this with Jason too, but the quality was a little bit bad, so I decided to re-record it in the end. I will discuss the set in full together with like the new Varga, new Rezel, and Gabuelius once those cards are revealed officially, not just in the anime. So look forward to next week, probably like Wednesday or so. I will make a video on my first impressions of the set, so you can look forward to that. But otherwise, if you like this video, please give it a like. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. It helps support the channel a lot. Trust me, a lot. And if you want some exclusive POV fights of all the different decks from this set and previous sets, I also make channel member exclusive videos for that as well. But with that, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.